Folks, ladies and gentlemen, everybody watching this and listening to this, I was just saying to my guest that I have not been this excited in a really long time. And I want to just share very quickly, back in January, I was shopping in Goodwill, which is the world's best bookstore. And I saw this book right here that can't be any bigger than 6 or 7 inches sticking out of the corner. And I'm always on the hunt for my personal development books. And I saw Psychology of Winning. I got to check this out. Well, sure enough, I picked it up for, let's see, the price is on the back, $1.99. And this book radically transformed my life because my guest today, Mr. Denis Waitley, who is one of the godfathers of this personal development industry, has the #1, and I know I said this already in the introduction, the #1 best-selling audio program of all time, The Psychology of Winning. Just to put it into words is hard, is how this man has shaped me and from afar changed my life. And Mr. Waitley, I'm so appreciative. Let me say Denis before you yell at me, Denis. I want to say thank you. Seriously, thank you for being here. This is an honor of my lifetime, and I genuinely mean that. So thank you, Denis.
Well, thank you too, Devin. And I'm glad you got that for $1.95 or $1 because another guy that I was talking to found one in a dumpster. And so he reached down the dumpster and so he got it for free. I was hoping there won't be too many in the dumpster, but I'm happy that Goodwill had the goodwill to have you stop by. So that's great.
Well, Denis, we're also here to discuss a new book that you've written. And as I've had the opportunity to hear you speak on multiple occasions within the past 2 months, I first want to acknowledge you. And by the way, for everybody that's listening, Denis's new book is The New Psychology of Winning, Top Qualities of a 21st Century Winner. And we're going to tell you about a few opportunities about in relation to this book a little later on. But first off, Denis, I heard you in this book. This was you. And when I heard you speak and what you wrote in there, I said, wait, this really is Denis. So I thought that was the coolest part about the book as a whole. And not only that, but how you've translated your original work, which was published many years ago, many decades ago, and made it relatable for everybody today. And Denis, I want to jump right into it. You said something on page 4 that I have written down here on some of the notes that I have to prepare for this interview. This is what your father told you one evening. The marvelous place between your right and left ear, your brain, is your universe. How you choose to view life will always be the way life will be to you. Now, that is beautiful and obviously talks about the power of perspective. But I'm curious, as you've gone through 88 years of life, how has what your dad told you that evening stuck with you? And how has that enabled you to get to where you are at this point in time?
Well, Devin, it's the most important advice probably I ever got because he did that when I was 9 years old. And so he would come in and lean against my light switch, and then he would be able to blow it out by leaning back. And, he was magic. So he blew my light out and he said, oh, by the way, it's dark all over the world right now. I said, no, it isn't, Dad. It's noon in Australia. Sorry, we learned that in school today. And he said, no. The only world you'll ever know is the one you view through your unique perspective. It doesn't matter what happens out there. It's how you take it and what you make of it. And what I've learned is that's so true, that everyone is living within the universe of their own perspective, their own viewpoint, their own prejudice, their own bias, their own experience, their own faith, their own belief. And you cannot change another person's belief. You can only be more inclusive of trying to understand why they believe the way they do. So the big answer is diversity is what exists between your left ear and your right ear, because that's the universe in which you've been raised since you've been born. And everyone has a different universe. And so no wonder we see things from a different viewpoint. So the idea that's carried through my life is I never make an assumption about somebody until I know where they're coming from, because my assumptions are half time wrong.
Dennis, that is magnificent. And you have a way when you talk about treating animals like people, and you say all of these things, and I'm just saying, wow, this is wisdom. And I see, Dennis, I'm already getting ahead. I'm a little too excited right now. Okay, Dennis, I'm a little too excited. But the second thing that really struck me was actually on the very next page. And it goes towards one's discovery of their gift. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who are living jobs and living lives that they're not happy in because they haven't found the gift, what they were born to do. And what I realized by reading your book was that you said when you were a young boy, your teachers always told you that you had really good communication skills, and also you were able to write very well. So my question to you, Dennis, is, do you believe that we can find our gifts by going back to our childhood and asking ourselves the question, what was I naturally talented at and enjoyed as a child?
And my answer is an absolute yes. In fact, I would say to everyone watching, dust off your childhood. Look at age 5 to 15, about 5 to 15. If you can't remember back that far, look, maybe grammar school through high school is fine. What did you like to do in school? Was there a favorite subject? Were there ones that bored you? Of course there were. Were there things that you liked to do after school? Of course. So what did you love to do in school, after school, Saturday and Sunday, and every evening? And what do you like to do most today if you didn't have to earn money, if you didn't have to spend your time working for someone else? So if money were not a problem, if time was okay, and circumstances would allow, what would you do with each day if you could choose what to do? The answer is in the childhood discovery of budding talents, because we're all born with an abundance of talents. There are at least 19 big ones. There are many more. At first, I thought all talent was inborn, and I preached that for many years. So that's why I told people to make sure that they dusted off their childhood and their weekends and their hobbies to find that big passion, that big burning fire within. If they could bring that out early, you have a great life. Sometimes you don't want to wait till retirement to do it because that takes too long. But one thing is sure, you can still develop talent later in life, as I've discovered through neuroscience. God has gifted us with the ability to find new talents if we're only willing to learn that the brain can be rewired even at my age. So at my age, I can develop new talents, new skills, new memory, new languages, learn new things, make my life a little younger. So I can go from 88, maybe, let's not be Pollyanna. I can go from 88 to 70, 18 years, no problem there. So right now I'm behaving about 68 and trying to stay at 68. So what I'm doing, I'm hanging around young people. I'm reading a lot. I'm writing a lot, listening to music, doing things that younger men would be doing. And sure enough, my body is responding, saying, well, I thought you were older, but I guess you're not. And so to answer that question directly, yes, chase that passion, not the pension. The money will come if you're doing what you love. But if you're doing something you don't love, it's going to take a lot longer, because then you have to just save the money and hope that you live long enough to chase your passion later. Chase it today, not tomorrow.
Dennis, as you look at the world, and so many people, over 70% of the workforce, are miserable going to work every day, what do you attribute that to? The fact that so many people are living the life that they don't want to live?
I attribute it to the fact that they haven't believed that they have the potential inside to be anything more than they were trained to be. And so they're a product of their environment, they're a product of what their parents preach to them, their teachers, their friends, especially the media. Hollywood shows us there are beautiful people, there are celebrities, there are gorgeous people, there are strong people, and we're not one of them. So we're the people that watch the rich and famous, and we watch them at night, and we spend hours and hours of watching other people making money, having fun in their professions. And if the truth were known, you're happier in your own skin than you would be in their skin, because they're so busy trying to maintain that image that they've lost their perspective on what is really important. So I would say to them, you've got more potential than you could use in 100 years. And you're stuck in place because you don't believe that there's that much room for you to grow at your age, the way you look, how old you are, with your religion, your gender. You're stuck in this uniform. And I'm here to tell you at 88, I have learned just the opposite. I have seen people my age become more successful from my age on than they were the first 80 years of their lives, because they majored in minors and did things that were tension relieving. So my first advice would be, stop spending so much time watching other people who you think are famous and then trying somehow to emulate them. Find out your own drummer, your own passion, and chase it. But there's a little laziness that sets in. There's a lot of fear. And the most thing we're afraid of is the fear of rejection, and the fear of being embarrassed, and the fear of being wrong. And that's why in high school, you begin to lose the American dream, because you don't want to raise your hand. You appear stupid if you ask a question. When you're in grammar school, you raise your hand, you want to talk all the time, you want to say everything, you got the answer to everything, you want to be a fireman, an astronaut. You want to be everything when you're 5 or 6 or 7. But by the time you get to high school, hey, it's cool. I'm not going to be like that. I'm not that good looking. I'm not that strong. I'm not a good athlete. I can't dance. Girls don't like me. Boys don't like me. And you begin to put yourself as a redwood tree in a flower pot. Don't be a redwood tree in a flower pot. Be root bound. Get out of that pot and start realizing you got more potential you could use if you live to be 200.
And I know that's how long we're going to have you around for, Dennis, at least 200. I could tell already. Dennis, I wrote down your definition of winning, and I'm going to read it to everybody, and I'd like you to comment on it. How did you come up with this? You said that winning is living up to the potential you were born with and helping other people at the same time as you realize your own dream. Now, what I mention about that, why I mention it, is because it doesn't necessarily say anything about money or the material gain. So what is success all about to Denis Waitley?
Success is all about believing that you have made a little teeny difference, a miniature footprint on the sands of time, that in your existence, which is very short, it's such a short ride mortally. And though we spend so much time worrying and hurrying, and my definition is, we're here to make the world a better place by doing whatever we do, in whatever talent we have, in whatever time we're given. Our job is to plant shade trees under which we'll never sit. So we're gardeners planting shade trees for future generations. Makes us feel good when we do things that benefit others, because they say thank you, and sometimes they thank us, sometimes they don't. But the inner feeling of being a servant leader, somebody helps other people, that's what me. If I can save a flower, a tree, a dog, a frog, I mean, if I can make one life breathe easier, and I've taken this from much wiser people than me, believe me. I go all the way back to the beginning of Chinese culture. I go back to the scriptures. I talked to John Wooden, John Wooden, the most successful NCAA basketball coach. he and I were standing in the back of an arena, and nobody noticed us because we were two old men. Well, he was 90 and I was 60 something. So we were two old guys drinking coffee, eating a burrito. But when he was on stage, they gave him a standing ovation before he even got on stage. And then when he went off stage, he got two. He got another one. I had to work really hard to get one while I was on the stage, but they looked at their program when I was off the stage to see who was missing. And then he and I left the stage, so the lights were no longer shining on us for that moment. We were in the back of the arena, and not one person noticed who we were. We had not been on television that much. I had not been on hardly at all, and John was only on during ball games. So we were just two old guys having a burrito and a cup of coffee, and no one asked for an autograph I mean, I wanted to tell people, you know who we are? I mean, we're two guys that have been important in our time. And Wooden said it very clearly. He said, you know, I'd trade all 16 NCAA championships to be with my wife, Nell. He said, you know, we still send out the Christmas card from both of us. She's been gone for 15 years, but I still send the card out with both our names on it. He said, that's the important thing for me, Dennis, is not what I've done and not how many I've won or how much I've won. It's kind of the small number of people that love me and I love, and my family, and making the world a little better, letting my players play, but not running up and down to make sure that they're winning. I want to let them play the game and have fun, but not just win the championships. And they won because they were talented, and I let them free to be. And I only coached during practice. I said, whoa, you mean you're not one that takes the time out every 30 seconds and then gets the strategy for the last 10 seconds? He said, no, you know, I decided that I would coach hard and bring out the potential of them, then let them play, because they should be having fun. That's a longer answer, but the real truth is I have really learned from people like that. Success is making one life breathe easier, which makes you inhale and exhale much easier yourself. I also believe in financial independence, however, and I believe that it's important for a guy my age not to be a stowaway in his children or grandchildren's home, or to be dependent on the government for social security, because depending on the government for my financial future is like hiring a CPA who's a compulsive gambler. I don't want the government to gamble with my money. So I want to be able to have a dignified life in my 80s. And when my children say, be quiet, you're going to put you in an old folks home, I'm going to say, huh, you can't do it. I got my own choice. I go where I choose because I have my dignity. I take care of myself. Thank you.
That is funny. And that story with John Wooden, wow, still sending it to his wife 15 years later. And obviously you've learned from some magnificent people. So Dennis, in your opinion, what is the power behind having a mentor or coach? And who have been some of the most influential people in your life?
Well, that's a good one. I think people who inspire you, not necessarily just thump you. You know, the stick is good, but I still like the carrot and honey. So I still like to be inspired rather to be, shall we say, told what to do. And I don't want to live in fear. So the role models that I have began with my grandmother. And the reason my grandmother was such a great role model is we had a lot of argument, a lot of problems at home, and it wasn't a fun place to be. So in order to get out of that, I went to my grandmother's home, rode my bike, and a long story short, she saw potential in me. She thought I was a good boy. She thought I could be a servant leader. She told me to model myself after people who'd contributed to life. She said, don't worry about the celebrities. Just do something that's magnificent in your garden and you'll end up being a good man, but always be honest and authentic. So she was one. And then, of course, there's the junior high school teacher who gave me As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, which reinforced my garden. then of course I started meeting people along the way. You know, I started meeting people even at the Naval Academy. I started meeting people when I went to Annapolis, and met people when I became a pilot. But then I was so fortunate to meet Dr. Jonas Salk, the developer of the first polio vaccine. And I remember him telling me I was out of the Navy not too long, maybe only about 3 years. So I was only 3 years out of being a Navy pilot. And he said, "You're a curious young man." He said, "You have a nice personality. People believe what you say." And he says, "You're very dangerous though, because you don't know much about science and you don't know much about how polio came to be, yet you're telling my story." He said, I'll give you some advice. Make sure that you're doing something that is science-based. Make sure you're not just telling people they can walk on water. Tell people they have more potential they could use. Check your facts. Try to make it firsthand rather than secondhand. And Dennis, just be authentic. And by the way, you're not telling them that you're a scientist, are you? No, I said, no, I'll tell them the truth, that I'm raising money for you by telling your story. And he said, well, he said, "You're only dangerous in that you don't know enough about your subject. So I want you to keep reading and learning." And he said, "You have a great potential." He became a great role model because he tried all the things that didn't work to create the polio vaccine at a time when every summer, now talk about the pandemic. Here's a guy, I'm a guy 88 who had to worry about getting polio 5 summers in a row. I mean, it wasn't just 2 years, 20 and 21. I'm talking about 1947, 48, 49, 50 and 51, before he even developed the vaccine, which didn't really come out till about 54 or 55. So we couldn't go swimming in a swimming pool. We couldn't go to a movie in the summertime, all summer. No movies, no swimming pool, no drinking fountain. Be careful, you're going to get polio. So we had to be on our guard and at our best. And I understand this pandemic is a lot trickier and a lot different, a lot overreaching, but it reminds me how much you have to be at your best when there's fear coming in the door.
Dennis, in terms of fear, people face, as you mentioned earlier, fear of rejection, fear of failure. What is the cure to fear?
You know, fear, of course, you know, we have acronyms. We call it false evidence appearing real or false education, but fear is real. Fear is real for a child. As far as they're concerned, there's a monster under the bed. Now, you may tell them there's no monster. You may laugh it off. But when you turn the light off again, that monster may come back for that child. And the feeling of fear is so real. The problem is fear panics, stifles, compels, inhibits. Fear is the greatest hammer because it makes you do things you don't want to do, and it forces you. So people use fear to make you do things that are not good for you. They make you do it because you're afraid if you don't do it, something bad will happen to you. You'll be rejected even more. Fear also inhibits you. It prevents you from doing things because if you try them, you might get hurt. So fear is the greatest hammer and red light. It's the inhibitor and the compeller, where desire is the opposite. Desire is the propeller instead of the compeller, and desire, instead of inhibiting, it ignites. So the ignition comes from desire, the inhibition comes from fear, the compulsion comes from fear, the propulsion comes from desire. The way to overcome fear is to find somebody who's overcome what you're afraid of and has better science and a better example of what you. So I always follow people who've done what I haven't done and I'm afraid of. So if I was going to jump out of a plane, I tell you one thing, I'd talk to a paratrooper first, I'd talk to a guy that assembles parachutes second, and I'd talk to a skydiver, a really good one third, and then a skydiving instructor. And then I'd learn to overcome my fear. I was ejected out of a plane, but I didn't want to leave. So I ejected myself with a 20mm cannon shell shooting me out of the cockpit so I wouldn't crash. But I don't look forward to just jumping out of a plane and saying, okay, I'll pull the D ring and it might be packed by somebody who had the flu or wasn't there? What if an American flag came out and said, oh, sorry. So you might think I should be a skydiver, but I don't trust myself unless I'm around somebody who teaches me how to pack my own chute. Fear is overcome by knowledge and action. And knowledge gives you the belief that you know how to defuse the bomb. Because if you're in the bomb squad, it's not a very fun thing to do. Because if you take wire yellow and wire white, and it's not the right combination, you've made a mistake that's very costly. But if you learn from an expert bomb disassembler, and he or she shows you how to do it, how to approach it, and that's the way you develop courage. You develop courage through training and skills, not through running up and throwing a grenade in a machine gun nest, then dying at the same time. That's last second courage, but real courage is being prepared for what comes ahead and being able to handle it when it happens. So fear is handled best by knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits.
And Dennis, when we talk about, I mean, there's so much talk about in terms of winning and success. You've worked with Olympians, astronauts, a whole gamut of ultra successful and what people consider to be extraordinary. As you look at those people, what have you observed to be, let's say, 2 to 3 common traits amongst those people?
Oh, I've sure seen those, and I would have liked to have them myself a lot earlier. I would have been a lot more successful had I stumbled onto what they stumbled onto. So the first thing they stumble onto is that they see somebody or something that turns them on. It really excites them when they're young or at a certain time, and they say, you know, I want to do that. I want to be like that. I have this burning inside of me that says, I believe in my dream when that's all I have to hang on to. So the first thing they have is they develop a burning fire, a magnificent obsession about something. And then they actually believe that they're capable of getting there. I don't know why they believe that. I think it's because they also run across other people who encourage them. And so most Olympians have found a coach who says, you know, I see world-class potential in you. I know you're young and you make a lot of mistakes, you fall, but I believe that if you really got into this, learned the correct swing, I think you could be a world-class athlete or world-class this. And to have somebody substantial with credibility believe that you have potential, that opens up the idea that maybe you have a right to believe in your dream. Because a lot of people don't believe in their dream because no one has ever approached them to say, hey, read some biographies. If you read some biographies, you'll find that people have come from much worse circumstances than you have. And so I want you to read about what she did, what he did, what Walter Payton did, what Helen Keller did, what Colin Powell did, what each person, and they came from circumstances so much worse than mine. I said, wow, I don't even have a hill to climb where they had a mountain to climb. So I think the Olympians have the passion behind them, a coach that says, I think you can, and I'm going to give you a passport, which is a belief in yourself. There's a reason to believe in yourself. And then I think, they really have to surround themselves with knowledge, training, skills. They have to be willing to put in and pay the price of success. There is no such thing as an overnight success, except in the lotto. And then you lose all the money anyway because you weren't prepared for the windfall that you got. So every Olympian, every rock star, every business executive, every tycoon, every person who has an app that has been successful and made them millions has been working on it for a long time. a lot longer than people think. So I think it's chasing your passion, not your pension. I think the successful people, I want to get right down to the nitty gritty. So they have self-esteem, believing in their dream without having accomplished anything yet. They don't have self-confidence yet, but they begin to develop it when they have little teeny successes. So they begin to discover that by the inch it's a cinch, by the yard it's hard. So instead of taking giant leaps forward, you take baby steps and you stair step your way to the top. So much better. Low goals short term, low goals short term. Pull yourself up another notch, climb to that next rung. Then you get a reward. For each little success, you get the reward of some kind of payment back to you, a feeling of confidence. And confidence is built by small local success, which gives you the belief you can risk more and more as you begin to climb little by little. So every Olympian, every champion I know starts getting these little successes and says, hey, this is working. I think I've got, maybe I'll take a little bigger risk. Maybe I'll go from local to regional, and then from regional to national, and then from national to global. But you don't suddenly just become that sudden success. It's an inch by inch. They learn that, and I've seen that in everyone. Probably the most important thing is resilience, learning to deal with failure. Failure is fertilizer. Doesn't smell good, doesn't taste good, doesn't feel good, don't like it. It's terrible to be around, but it grows green people. You fertilize the future with failure, and you don't have to repeat that. So failure is something to learn from and not be repeated, but every success has experienced failure. And only by experiencing failure can you discover the sweet taste of success. You wouldn't know what it was unless you had failed a number of times while getting there.
Dennis, you had mentioned that there's always a price paid to reach your goals. As you reflect back on your life, what was the price that you paid to get to where you are now? And looking back, would you pay that price again, or would you do things differently this time around?
Really a good question, a big question. Looking back, I would say that what I did, what other people don't do, is I spent my free time doing things that were moving me toward my passion, rather than sitting there watching other people making money, having fun on television. So instead of watching so many sitcoms, so many MTVs, so much music, so many sporting events, I began to say to myself, wait a minute, I'm watching in prime time. That's the only time I have that's free. I'm working in the military, I'm flying an airplane, I'm defending the country, I'm trying to make a living. I got 4 children, I got my wife, I got a mortgage. I had to spend all my days earning money to feed my family. So then there was the evening. The evenings, instead of watching TV, I was reading, I was writing, I was studying, I was moving forward. I was spending time with the children. So fortunately, when I was younger, I wasn't very successful. So I had a lot of time to spend with my family at home. I didn't really start traveling until I was in my middle 30s. So when my children were young, I was with them. So what I would do, I would continue to do what Lee Trevino said. As long as there's daylight, there are golf balls to be hit. And he'd rather get blisters on his hands from hitting the balls rather than to watching videos of other people playing good games. I also felt that by sticking to things that were goal achieving instead of tension relieving, instead of watching a great dramatic show, something exciting, something funny, something happy, something frightening, I worked on me. It's the only free time I had. So my prime time, 6 to 11 p.m. and Saturdays when I wasn't with my young children. So I spent Saturday with them, and then Sunday with a little bit of religion, a little church, some reflection. I spent Sundays reading, speaking, And my Saturday evenings, instead of watching TV or going out or bowling or playing golf on Saturday, I was speaking to women's clubs, Optimist clubs, Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, Kiwanis clubs, anybody that would take me. I was doing what I wanted to do in the present rather than putting it on layaway. And if that's the number one thing I would say, whatever it is that you want to do, you got to do it now, because you can't do it later. You need to be doing what you project yourself to be doing as often as possible in the now. Don't put it off till later, because you don't know when that will be, and there's no better time, believe me. There's no future time that is better than the present moment, because this is the only one you have any control over. Now, what I would do different? Oh boy. I would not spend as much time jumping on airplanes, traveling to China, speaking in 50 Chinese cities to millions of people, believing that I was a global success and that all the plane trips and all the away from my family, that I was doing something that was chasing top achievement. I would stop chasing it, and I would take a deep breath and say, wait a minute. And so fortunate today, you can do it on Zoom. You can do it virtually. All the plane trips, all the time away from my family, thousands and thousands of hours and miles, just waiting, going and coming. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that as much anymore. I would say, is this moving me forward toward my goals? Is this just what I'm addicted to? Am I addicted to becoming somebody, only to discover that you're only somebody for a little while, maybe a few hours or a few days or a few years? And I would not travel as much or chase it as much. And I would not try to be as well known as we all want to do. And I would try to achieve what made me happy every day and what made my family happy. But being well known is not important, believe me. Only well known enough to achieve your goals. You don't have to be well known to be successful and happy. You just have to be doing what's really important to you.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. And I love hearing you talk about that. And I also love hearing you talk about what I'm going to ask about next. What's the difference between living in the moment and living for the moment?
Everything. When you're in the moment, you're a child coloring. And you're coloring because you love to color. And then your dad says, hey, dinner time. Don't hear him. Don't hear your dad. Why? You're coloring. You're in the moment. I said it's time for dinner. You keep coloring. Finally, your dad says 1, 2, 3, and then you jump up and run in. So I want to be like a child coloring, lost in my moment, or an Olympian in that moment. Here I am. I have this moment. I can only be in this moment. There is no past. The training's over. There is no future. There's only this moment. I'll live in this moment, make this moment the greatest moment in my life. However, there's a good likelihood I may come in 121st in the world. I may come in 4th and not even win a bronze. I may not even get on the platform. No one even may remember that I was here, but I'm an Olympian. I'm in the moment. I'm here. I'm here in this moment, and I happen to perform at my best in my event in that moment. So instead of living for the gold, for the endorsement, for the arrival, for the accolades you're going to get as a result of the perfect performance, you're living it instead of waiting for it. And so success is not something that you arrive at and suddenly you're a success, because even if you're a world-class athlete, doesn't make you a world-class person, and doesn't make you good at your family, doesn't make you happy. There's a momentary thing there, but being in the moment is being fully engaged with all your senses, in what you're doing right now, and not just moving through it towards something that you're striving for. Because when you get there, you'll be surprised. Not what you thought it would be. And it's good, but it's not as good as the taste at the time. The memory of the taste is not as good as the taste at the time. And no Facebook and no Instagram and no video of you will ever be the same as the experience of doing it.
Dennis, what advice would you give to someone that is either in their late teens, 19, 20, or their early 20s, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, that is looking to become a speaker, that is looking to become a trainer, and they're just getting started in their journey? What advice would you give to this person?
You know, I would say the most important thing would be, what is it that turns you on to help people with? What is your brand? With me, it happens to be POW. It was prisoner of war, but it was psychology of winning. So it happens to be a metaphor for me. So I was studying winners, and I was able to make that a brand that I could stick with and make it something that people could remember me by, because there's so much noise. So you really have to get a story that is authentic and that is you, not just not a Tony Robbins story, not a Jim Rohn story, not a Zig Ziglar story, not a, you know, not somebody else's story. And I talked this yesterday with Tom Ziglar, Zig Ziglar's son. We had a nice conversation, and Zig Ziglar, some guy came up to Zig and said, "Zig, I want to be just like you." And he said, "No, you don't. You don't want to be just like me. You want to be just like you." He said, "The only time you want to be just like me is when you're one-on-one with somebody after you speak. And then you want to be somebody that gives your full attention to that person at that time, to let them know you're authentic and not just a presenter. But you don't want to be a Zig Ziglar or a Denis Waitley or a Jim Rohn or a Maxwell, a John Maxwell. You can learn from them. You can take the information which is coming through the river of life. You can take the scriptures. You can take everything you've learned. You must be an original you. You must use your own personality, your own style. With me, it's a Pat Boone warmed over kind of a somnambulistic, put you to sleep voice. Earl Nightingale said to me, he said, "Dennis, you got good stuff, kid." He said, "You got real good stuff." He said, "I like that Psychology of Winning cassette that you did in the church that day for World Book." He said, "It was sent to me, and I'm calling you to tell you you got good stuff." He said, "You don't have a dramatic voice, I have to tell you. You don't have a radio voice. You don't have a dynamic voice. You don't have an exciting voice. You probably don't even present." I said, "No, I don't. I write. I mean, I'm an introvert." And he said, "Well, listen, when we record you, I'm going to stand in the booth behind the glass, and I want you to talk to me." I said, but you want me to read it off of a music stand, because I can't just do it off the top of my head." He said, "No, you have to have your information in your brain the way you want to deliver it in your own style. But I want you to talk with me. I want you to tell me why I should be listening to you. And I want you to be authentically you. I want you to be my Jiminy Cricket." And I found that I'm not a dramatic speaker. I don't jump around. I don't get on one knee like Zig. I can't jump up and down like Tony Robbins. I don't run up and down the stage. I can't bop up and down like we do at a rock concert. I'm just sort of, and I do move. I don't just stoic, but I move from one spot to another spot to the center, never a podium. So let me give some real good advice though. Okay, here's what I would do. I would get my brand, I would get my story, I would make it authentic. I would use original humor, not jokes, because somebody would have just told it before you, but you wouldn't have known it because you didn't hear them talk. So I would get humor that was real. I would find out, if you're going to speak to a group, find out what is happening in their community, what happened that is humorous, what happened that is interesting, what happens locally. And I would get to know the audience and what what might turn them on. So I would really be audience sensitive and remember who I'm talking with, not talking to, but talking with and discussing this with. So I would open up with something interesting to them right away about what they were just doing or what happened last night. So I always do that. I talk to the taxi driver, talk to somebody that knows. And then another thing that I do, which seems simple, but I never trust the hotel, the microphone, the atmosphere, the temperature, what they say. I never do that. And I would make certain if I were speaking in front of an audience, I would have, which I don't have here, but I would have full light on my face, and I would have everyone in the audience be able to see my face no matter where they were sitting. I would want them to see the expressions. When I cried, I would want them to see the tear. I'd want them to see the smile. I want them to see how I'm emoting with body language. I'd want them to be able to hear what I said, see what I was saying, watching me, and I would like them to believe that I was talking only to them. So I would stop and look someone directly in the eye and stop and talk with them, and then move to someone else and someone in the back. And not that it's trained, it becomes spontaneous. And spontaneity is conditioned reflex. So I've given my talks over and over again. I never speak from notes that I'm holding. I don't like to speak from a podium because it limits you. I like to be able to walk, but sometimes you can't. And I love not to look down and read. And I don't like to speak with a canned presentation. So I don't like to speak straight from memory, but I like to depend upon a few points. So I'd have 3 to 5 points that I was going to cover. Unfortunately, I tried to cover 10, and 10 are too many points unless you're going to give a workshop. You just can't cover that much information. So you have to have 3 to 5 main points, and you're going to hit those with content, humor, emotion, and a story behind each illustration of that point. So as we know, stories sell and facts tell. And so people love storytellers. So you do need to be a good storyteller. So I would tell the speakers starting out, look at the other speakers for their content, not for their style. And learn from people whose style works for them, but don't try to copy their style unless it's your style already. If you're an introvert like me, then you won't jump around and leap around and run back and forth and jump up and down the stage. Try to be somebody who says, I'm fired up, I'm fired up. I'm honest, I am fired up. No, I'm just this kind of guy that says, I know some of you are going to sleep now. Well, Devin, one last thing. I think the reason I've sold more audios than anyone is because my voice tends to put people to sleep. And that's a great way, if you're an insomniac, it's a great way to relax when you listen to me. So maybe people have been too on edge, had too many lattes and too many Starbucks, and they use me to kind of bring them down a little bit. But get your own style. Heavy on content, heavy on stories, light on lecturing, light on telling them you know everything. And I would say light on sales. I would say light on telling them how great you are on page 53 of your new book. And, Zig and Brian and a few people are the only ones in the world who've been able to get up. And Zig has been one of the few people in the world who's been able to say to people, you got my money in your pocket. I got your programs in this bag, and they're special today. You got 2 references in cash. I'll give you your books and tapes and CDs and MP3s and coaching system. And I'll meet you in the back of the room and autograph them for you. If you give me my money, I'll give you your tapes. And they all did what they were told, and they went back. And he said, Dennis, you could do a lot more if you put the arm on them. And I said, there are teachers and there are salesmen. I happen to be a teacher and it works for me. If you're a salesman, it works for you. And if they know you're a salesman, and if they know you're going to put the clothes on them, fair enough. But what if you're Norman Vincent Peale? What if you're Paul Harvey? What if you're Earl Nightingale? What if you're somebody who's known as a coach and mentor and not as someone who's trying to get an extra 5,000, 1,000, 500 bucks out of them? Usually people can tell when they're being sold, and I think they prefer to make the decision themselves. However, I happen to be too light on the sales and too much just the teacher, but it works better for me. So you have to decide, I think, early whether you want to be somebody really strong in telling them to buy you, or give a content so great that they'll be seeking you because of what you taught them.
That's one thing that'll always stick with me when you said that, when you came to present to Les Brown's community. My penultimate question, very quickly, is if you had the opportunity today to talk with Jim Rohn, Earl Nightingale, Zig Ziglar, the list goes on, Stephen Covey, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say to Earl, thank you for discovering me and having faith in me and telling me to stop by in Chicago so that I could be the second audio album of someone talking. I would say thank you for the strangest secret, that you become what you think of most of the time. What I'd say to Jim Rohn is, whether you knew it or not, Jim, you sitting there on your stool with your reading glasses and a flip chart, and the only promotion you ever said was, you're probably going to want to write this down. And then you flipped off those wonderful one-liners, one after another, that if you want to make a change, if you want to change the world, change the person who's viewing the world. And all the things that he used to say that just came so easy. I would say thank you, Jim, for being a mentor for me and a real great example of what a real business coach. I would say to Zig, you're the authentic sandwich and pots and pans and waterless cookware salesman, because Zig admitted, he said, you know, of course I was a great salesman. I sold my furniture, sold my car before I sold anything that made me any money. But Zig and I gave 500 talks before anyone would pay us. So we both said that we're not a product of some phenomenon, promotion, or a best-selling book. We paid the price by going from $175 to $250 to $500 to $1,000. So if you're starting out as a speaker, don't worry about how much you're getting paid. Just make sure you pay more in value in what you're giving than you're receiving in payment, and the price is going to go up the more valuable you become to your audience.
Thank you for that, Dennis. That is fabulous information that we need to hear as evolving speakers. So thank you, especially in this world where speaking fees are exuberant. Everybody's, I want to get paid now. I want to get paid now, but 500 free ones. Wow. Dennis, last question I have for you. What is the legacy that you hope to leave behind and the contribution that you have made in your lifetime here on earth?
I have reduced mine to realize that my significance comes in my understanding of my insignificance. I'm an oboe player, 15th row of the maestro's orchestra. And what little time I've had and I have left on the earth, I'm going to spend it doing things that my family will say, this guy gave it 100% every day. He was always optimistic. He was a flawed man. He was not a perfect man. He made every mistake you can make, but he was our dad, and he was somebody we could watch rather than preach to us. So by watching the way he lived, we benefited more than what he said to us. So all I plan on leaving as a legacy is living it by making each day worth living, by making someone better for having talked to me. So all I want people to say is, you know, Dennis, I like me best when I'm with you. you allow me to be all I can be, and you actually edify me, don't you? I said, yeah, I see world-class potential in you, no question. Let me hear more. Tell me more about you. Let me learn about you. But I believe differently than you do, Dennis. You're a centrist. You're not a Republican or a Democrat. You're an independent. What do you believe? And I said, well, I'm looking for leaders. If you know a good leader, tell me who it is so I can study them. I'm in search of leaders right now. I don't see too many around that are willing to pay the price, but I'm not critical because I need to be a role model rather than a critic. So all I care to leave is the joy of having and to be someone that they can be proud that I planted shade trees for them. That's all. I'm not looking for anything that carries on because it only lasts 20 years is a long time for somebody to be around and they forget you. Nobody will remember my grandmother after I died. So my grandmother will be gone as far as any memory of any living person will be. And so it gives you about a generation of identification. So if you want to be known forever, forget it. Just be known for what you're doing for the people that you love. They can be measured on 5 fingers, and 5 is 10, and maybe 10 toes, maybe 20 people. Maybe 20 people will be the ones you love the most. So don't try to be a world changer. Change yourself, and that'll change the world.
Well, Dennis, we will never, the world will never be the same because of your work, and we will never forget you. Dennis, before we say bye to you, I would like to bring on Adora Evans. Adora, are you here?
Yes,
Adora,
I am.
yes, and for the audience, Adora is here to tell us a little bit more about Dennis's new book, which is amazing. I didn't think I could read anything as good as The Old Psychology of Winning until I picked this bad boy up. I texted Adora yesterday. I said, I'm having a hard time preparing for this interview because there's just so much goodness in the book. The New Psychology of Winning, Top Qualities of a 21st Century Winner. Adora, what do you have for us?
Oh, I've enjoyed this interview as always so much, Devin. You're a phenomenal host, and everything that you put out into the world is just so full of your charisma, enthusiasm, and curiosity, which I love so much. Thank you for hosting Dennis today and having us here. I just want to let everybody know that they can go get the New Psychology of Winning on Amazon or on Audible, and many people enjoy the Audible as much or more because it's it comes from 18 hours of interviewing with Dennis. You hear it unedited and really just fresh off the press. And you know, Dennis has just a golden voice and is known so well for that. Also, me, Adora at adoracrystal.com, I can be reached if someone in your audience has a platform where Dennis would be valuable, you know, would be a valuable contribution. We don't get to say yes to everything, but we are saying yes to as many well-leveraged, right in alignment with our mission and vision that we can. We say as many yeses as we can.
Awesome, Adora. Well, thank you. And this has really been a pleasure. And I'll close out with saying, Dennis, thank you for this magnificent opportunity. As I said, this has really been one of the highlights of not only this podcast, which has been going on for over a year and 74 episodes now, but of my lifetime. I really mean that. And you, like I said, you will never be forgotten because of the work and, more importantly, the person that you are. So thank you, Dennis. I appreciate everything you've done, not only here today, but for me in my life. That Goodwill book has gone a long way, and I'll never be the same.
Well, Devin, I want to thank you too, and I want to give you something very honest. You're not only the next generation, but the next generation and the next generation of the thought leaders that we need to carry on this message that I've gotten from all the greats of the past. And so I'm looking to you to not only do the next 20, but the next 40, and maybe the next 60 years, so that you've got 3 20-year segments. So you're in the only finishing the first quarter. So you're not even in the second quarter. You're not even close to halftime. You won't be there for another 25 years. And then like people my age, I'm in overtime, but so I just finished the fourth quarter going into overtime, but overtime is when I'm in my best drill, because I know I have to make touchdowns in overtime in order to win. But I want to thank you for having me. I do edify you. I do believe in your message. I do believe that you are the kind of thought leader that we need for the next generation and beyond. And it makes me feel so honored and privileged to be part of your legacy.